is a real problem.
This is not fun and games. It's a corrupt system. This is life and death.
Billion people dying from smoking-related diseases.
70% of current smokers want to quit.
I smoked for 40 years.
50 years.
Using the patch.
Nicotine patches or chews.
Proven smoking cessation methods
should be promoted.
This hasn't helped.
Majority of them fail.
That makes no sense.
E-cigarette.
Un cigarrillo que utiliza electricidad.
Ein Umgang mit E-Zigaretten.
E-cigarettes.
You stop. Alternative to lighting up.
Stopped. We don't know if that's true or not.
They've been making headlines.
Don't look for an endorsement from the
Lung Association,
Heart Association,
World Health Organization,
Department of Health.
Lawmakers say there is actually
is raising the red flag.
dangers involved.
You need to be careful.
Quit or die.
Du monde de la vape est...
Potential harm is likely to be very, very small.
Usage has tripled.
Vapes are everywhere.
Causing blindness.
Promotes smoking.
Nicotine is in here.
Ignorance is a real problem.
Other than heroin.
Gateway to cocaine.
It's the most addictive drug there is.
But are they really that awesome? Every study has to be questioned. Cherry-picking studies.
Taxing them.
Regulated.
Tougher control.
Same as cigarettes.
Stupid fools. Easier to buy a cigarette.
They're considered cigarettes.
Than to buy an e-cigarette.
UK ban.
Gone!
My whole life, I've been told that smoking is bad. Smoking will kill you. Smokers are stupid. I pretty much thought that smoking was a thing of the past, part of history. I was wrong. I was shocked when I found out that 1 billion people are projected to die early from smoking this century. I was even more surprised when I found out that many people were using new ways to quit, but that those ways were being banned in more and more countries. On our journey to find the truth, we traveled around the world. We discovered a common mentality. People that choose to smoke deserve to die. Despite research showing modern cigarettes to be deadly, the number of smokers around the world continues to rise. Millions are dying early, casualties of a war they don't understand. Shoddy studies, fear of the unknown, and passionate enthusiasm are the weapons of choice. Battle lines were drawn. A culture war began. We discovered widespread corruption. To separate the truth from the lies, the emotion from the facts, we went to the leading doctors and scientists. In the end, our journey became about more than just smoking or vaping. It's about freedom, corruption, and the fate of future generations. This is the battle for 1 billion lives. Each year, the tobacco industry produces over 6 trillion cigarettes. That's enough to create a chain from Earth to Mars and back every single year. It is estimated that over 1.6 billion smokers will be on the planet in the next 20 years. That's more than the entire population of the Earth only about 100 years ago. To understand how we got to this point, we went to the Andes Mountains, where it all began. It's hard to believe that something so massive could begin as something so small. Historians tell us that ancient Incan priests were the only ones in the village who smoked tobacco, that they used it as a ceremonial cleanser. To understand where we are with this debate about vapor technology, we need to look at how we got here, and how 1 billion people now find themselves trapped. During the Industrial Revolution, tobacco use changed in a big way. Cigarettes made by massive tobacco companies became more heavily processed, cheap, convenient, and a big part of pop culture. The rise of cigarettes had begun.
LSMFT, LSMFT.
Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
Yes, in a cigarette, it's the tobacco that counts. And Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
If we think of the last century, the big breakthrough that really got us into the problem we have was actually a technology innovation in terms of the cigarette machine. That immediately allowed us to have millions and billions of cigarettes being produced. And sales took off. At the time, there was not much knowledge about the risk. There actually was already some hint of this by 1908, 1909, while it was taking off. Yale researchers were already starting to publish and advocate for people to not use tobacco because of fitness concerns and lung effects. By the 30s, the Germans had started producing data. By the 50s, the British had started producing data. And then we all know finally that 1962, the Royal College of Physicians report, 2 years later, the Surgeon General report came out. And shock horror, these products were not just sources of pleasure as people thought they were actually causing harm and death.
In the history of the world, no non-essential habit ever got so entrenched so fast. 70 million Americans smoke. Today they got a message from the United States Surgeon General, who has had a blue ribbon committee studying their habit for 14 months.
The committee has reached the overall judgment cigarette smoking is related to higher death rates in a number of disease categories.
If we go back to understand when did we first have knowledge that it's tar that kills and nicotine that addicts, we now know that BAT and Brown and Williamson knew this from the early 60s. You can say this is a cynical thing, why didn't they stop at that point? But they were a company with billions of dollars investment and we're not going to stop.
I became the Winston Man in 1981. I was 32 years old. And I got a call from an agent in New York, and he wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming up for an interview, for an audition. They're doing a casting for Winston. So I went in on an audition. 2 weeks later, I get a call that they narrowed it down. They want to see me again for a callback. So I had to go up the next day unshaven because they wanted to have that rugged look, because R.J. Reynolds was looking for a rugged macho kind of a theme. They come out and say, you, and you. And these are your new Winston men for 1981 and 82. Well, my jaw dropped. I was floored. I literally was floored. Never, ever, ever thinking about the outcome of what exactly I was doing and would have done over the next 8 years. And that was being 7.5 years as the Winston Man and over 42 ads showing smoking to be, associated with healthy activity. Because that's all tobacco marketing is.
Yeah, me and my Winstons. Me and my Winstons. We got a real good thing.
After practicing as a physician, I then went into organized medicine and headed up the organization which is like the mothership of doctors, the World Medical Association. And at that time, we were very, very strongly against tobacco, strongly against the tobacco industry, who we knew had lied about the mortality and morbidity linked to their product. And we knew that we were up against a huge marketing machine.
The Flintstones has been brought to you by Winston, America's best-selling, best-tasting filter cigarette.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
Did our first shoots up in Mount Evans, Colorado, which was pretty educational for me because do you know what happens to a 3-pack-a-day smoker at 12,000 feet on top of a mountain? It ain't pretty, especially when you're on oxygen and you're not able to smoke when you're on oxygen because you blow up. And I was there for a good 5-6 days with the crew. They were trying to capture the story of what our theme was, which was search and rescue, storm searcher. We would fly in with the helicopter, okay? We'd be out looking for whatever we're looking for, rappelling off the side of the mountain, which is what they paid me to do. And then at the end of the day, it was light up time. Sitting on the top of the rock, lighting a cigarette with your buddy, passing the cigarette to your buddy. So the theme was, let's tell a story about how macho these guys are, how they're saving lives, search and rescue, and then at the end of the day, the camaraderie is so special that they have to have a cigarette together to celebrate their successes for that day. That was the most machismo that they could come up with, which was now going to compete with the #1 brand of selling cigarettes, which was Marlboro at the time. Winston at that time was only #4.
50 head of cattle heading for home. Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
Within 2 years, Winston became the #2 selling brand right behind Marlboro. How'd that happen? Marketing. Spend more money. Let's keep associating this deadly product with something that kids want.
Gee, we ought to do something, Fred. Okay? How's about taking a nap? Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break. That's it.
My job was deliberately to seek out the vulnerable 13, 14, 15, 16, or 17-year-old and entice them into thinking that this is what they too could be like. That's all I did. 26 days a year I had to work for R.J. Reynolds, and they paid me over $100,000 a year. Not to mention being on billboards, magazines, Penthouse, Playboy, Popular Mechanics, anything that would be a male magazine considered, that's where my ads were. Because we weren't trying to entice the girls to smoke Winston, because they had their own. They had Virginia Slims and Eve and Satins and Capris, and I was ballsy enough to ask a question of the R.J. Reynolds tobacco executive, how come you guys from R.J. Reynolds don't smoke? He said, we don't smoke the shit, we just sell it. We reserve the right to smoke for the young, the poor, the black, and the stupid. And billions of dollars were there to fund it. They're spending more money marketing, okay, than a lot of people were spending to prevent it.
The US was slowly starting to pick its act up. It introduced some taxes. It couldn't make progress on advertising bans because of First Amendment protection. The tobacco industry was then trying to provide research grants to researchers to buy them off, or to at least ensure that the direction of research didn't go in more of a negative way. And that's when we had the era of the large tobacco-financed research groups around the world.
The Tobacco Institute, a trade association with a unique objective: to promote a free and informed discussion of all issues involving America's oldest industry.
We had a study done by the Wharton Applied Research Center at the University of Pennsylvania in 1979.
We were involved in grants with the Medical College of Virginia from 1930 to 1960.
Of course, there is the never-ending concern about the alleged effects of smoking on the health of the smoker.
The evidence is certainly inconclusive at this time.
There is no increase in lung cancer mortality rates.
An individual would have to sit in a crowded bar or cocktail lounge for more than 100 consecutive hours to inhale the equivalent of one filtered cigarette.
Well, this study was performed by the American Cancer Society.
That was proven with the study funded in part by the Massachusetts Lung Association,
which confirms some of our own thinking on the subject.
I basically got into the anti-smoking movement right after I graduated got a master's degree in public health, and where I learned that cigarettes are causing more deaths than everything else combined, and nobody was doing anything about it. And I got a job with the local county health department, and I was told that, oh, you have tobacco because nobody else wants the job. Back then in the 80s, there were 32 billion packs a year sold of cigarettes in America. 32 billion.
Nothing but the best for Mr. Ricardo. Winston Filter Blend.
Feel a wonderful smoothness deep down in your throat.
Change to Winston, I change for
me and my Winston.
Having done all these ads that I did and feeling pretty good about the money, I wasn't listening to the public's opinion about tobacco, because right about then is when you started getting all the negativity. Even though the Surgeon Generals had talked about secondary smoke and cancer being the #1 cause of premature death and disease. Now, this is around 1987 now, 86, 87, 88. And I had been doing the ads for almost 7 years. Now you're getting all the scuttlebutt. Now you're getting all the hate. You're starting to see anger. Smoking's killing people, and we got proof now.
It's best if there's no smoking so I can stay well. Because it hurts people like me who have asthma and can cause lung cancer even in non-smokers. If I could, I would tell the president to make it the law that no one smoke in public places.
Things in life that he's going to come in contact with and growing up
that he doesn't have control over, because we live in a free society and we have choices to make. And smokers have choices as well as non-smokers to be around people who smoke.
The tobacco industry, from the beginning, first tried to do what I guess any consumer good company would do, deny the evidence.
If you had your preference, would you want your kids or your grandkids to smoke or not smoke?
I have no preference.
We have no preference.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
Like father, like son. Think about it. For information on smoking and heart disease, ask your heart association.
There's now a movement with the National Cancer Institute, cancer, lung, heart, not to mention the government and Surgeon General, that says, hey, smoking's killing people, and we got proof now, and now we got evidence, we got tobacco files, we got people talking about it. Now I'm starting to get a little curious, because I'm getting the same thing from my kids. Daddy, quit smoking. My teacher said you're going to croak. Daddy, quit smoking. You're going to die. Dad, you're going to... What happens? My brother gets cancer. My brother, I was the youngest of three boys in my family. He was my older brother. He was only 3.5 years older. And he was diagnosed with cancer. And he was a smoker. And for about 5 years, I had to watch him deteriorate. And I'm doing the ads. When I did the ads, I was still worrying about my brother. And I had this horrible experience of driving to Boston. He was in the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And I walked through the doors. Here you have oncologists, doctors, nurses, people taking care of people who are dying, literally dying from what they chose to do at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, etc. Now they have to pay the price. So now I'm starting to get a little clued in here. Well, maybe this is bad. Maybe this garbage is killing people. My brother's dying from it. I'm certainly not feeling the way I did when I was 16, smoking a pack a day. Now I can't get up and down stairs quite as much. So I'm starting to see the logic behind all the hate. I started seeing smokers being seen not only as cool, macho, tough, rugged, beautiful, sexy, glamorous, fun-loving, free-spirited, but smelly, stinky, yellow-toothed people. Now you're starting to see the segue from 60% of the American people smoking or chewing or dipping or spitting, and now you're starting to see the swing. I had to make a decision, and there was a 6-hour ride home, and I probably smoked 2 packs of cigarettes on that ride home, because now I'm stressed. Now I'm starting to feel pretty bad about this, because now I got to go face my kid. And I talked to my son, and I walked in the door, and he talked to me. He said, Dad, you're going to die like Uncle Bob, right? Boom! Just like that. That's how it hit me. It was like a boom. There's a good chance that I will. That was my epiphany. So long ago. That's how it hit me. And my passion for my kids and my wife was so grand that I was going to beat it. Okay, so I made a decision. It was July 17th when I told my son, I'm going to quit. I promise I'm going to quit. Right hand up to God. I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. And he said, okay, Dad, you promise, right? Well, what you don't tell a 10 or 11-year-old is something and then not do it. Because they will hound you, and they will hound you, and they will hound you. Well, he hounded me until the Great American Smokeout in November of 1988.
You see this fan? Well, I use it when I'm around cigarette smokers. But I may get a chance to throw it away during the Great American Smokeout, the day the American Cancer Society asks every smoker in America to quit for 24 hours.
I picked that day. I told my son I was going to quit. And I did. I get a call from every Philadelphia news station, television station. I get a call from CBS This Morning with Harry Smith. I get a call from ABC. I get a call. They're picking me up by limo. They're taking me to New York. No one had ever quit smoking publicly, especially the Winston man, who's on every billboard, every magazine, everywhere for 8 years now, going on 8 years. And then he's biting the hand that feeds him. My brother's dying of cancer. Okay, I promised my kids I wouldn't, hurt myself like my brother. And I've seen so many people dying that I'm not going to do these ads anymore. I can't do it. I cannot physically and morally do it anymore.
Image has been a great concern for the tobacco industry. The person we choose this week was once one of the industry's leading image makers.
The tobacco industry had really played out to the peak of what it was going to do in trying to thwart policies and actions.
Our long and difficult 4-year journey down Tobacco Road has come to a victorious end.
The largest financial recovery in the history of the world.
We've arrived at our final destination, and that's the destination of tobacco justice.
Close to 33,000 lawsuits against big tobacco, though precedents were being set. So now if one person sues and you got the same disease, then so on and so on and so on and so on. So they sat around and said, let's come up with a way. And they went to meetings. They went to private meetings, according to the tobacco files that I've been privy to. And they said, we got to come up with something that's going to stop these lawsuits. Well, here's what you're going to have to do, big tobacco people. You're going to have to give us some money back in order for us to convince our constituency that that money, because we're sick and tired of paying for Medicare and Medicaid rehabilitation and prevention, because your product has caused this in our state. Michael Moore did it in Mississippi. Michael Moore took on big tobacco and said, I'm going to sue your asses. He's the only one that did it. He sued and won $12 billion. So then it became even more important that they justified this money being spent, even if it was for a year or two. They never said they were going to use it forever in the 25 years that they're going to get it. Florida said, oh my, I'd like some of that. We have same problem. We're suing too. They got 11 billion. Texas did it. They got 13 billion because it was all based on per capita and prorated number of citizens. Minnesota did it. Four states got $46 billion in a matter of a week. 46 billion. Well, every other state wanted to touch a piece of that. We want some of that. We're paying Medicare too. So let's come up with a number that everybody can live with. They came up with 200 billion plus the 46 that went previously to those 4 states. And they gave attorney generals 72 hours to sign on. And the only way they would get any money if they signed on without even knowing what was going on, and you'll get your money over the next 25 years. Every state did it, okay? But in that decision, in 72 hours, they had to sign off that they would not let anybody in their state sue big tobacco. That was in 1999, and the MSA became the first bailout. Yeah, we need it for the kids. We need it for the children. We need it for prevention, education, intervention, cessation. We need all the...
Like you, the nation's attorneys general have been fighting to help reverse the staggering toll tobacco takes on our society and to protect our children from a lifetime of addiction.
This plan, in short, will get big tobacco off the backs of our kids.
They got the money, they signed on, and then within 2 years, that money's gone. They either put it in bonds where they can't pay it back. They used it for road repair, waterfront restoration. They used it for, health departments, new computers, new labs. These states are not using the money that they said they needed. And the tobacco companies are now giving all this money to the states. And then nobody knew that within 48 hours after they gave up $246 billion, they raised the price of cigarettes 48 cents across the board to make up the 246. Nobody cares about it. Nobody wants to talk about it because it's not scandalous enough.
The tobacco industry has conceded defeat, and we have a settlement of historic proportions.
What did New Jersey do? They sold all their money in a bond. Okay, now it's due to be paid back, and New Jersey doesn't have the money to pay it back. There's 8 states that had done that. The other states wasted the money on everything but prevention, education, cessation. So there's more corruption, there's more government intervention, for keeping tobacco alive and keeping the big tobacco monopolies, raising $500 billion a year. $500 billion, if not more. That's what they admit to.
By the time of the Minnesota court case in 1998, the state of Minnesota didn't only seek redress in financial terms, but required that the tobacco industry place all of their previously secret documents in the public domain. And from then on, we knew the roadmap of the industry and what it had been since the 60s. So it was only in retrospect that we actually understood just how deep and pervasive the influence had been at the government level, at the researcher level, at the individual ministerial level. As tobacco rates start falling to maybe 20% or below 20%, you're getting into a hardcore group of smokers who are not smoking out of pure choice, but they're smoking because they are addicted and they have a physical need for nicotine in their lives.
I started smoking cigarettes at 12, and really, if I think about it, my daughter's not too far from 12. And thinking of her smoking a cigarette is really just sickening. The first time I ever smoked a cigarette, a few of my friends had come over to spend the night, and one of the older ones had brought a pack of cigarettes from her dad's carton. We proceeded to go to the treehouse across the street, and we smoked the entire pack of cigarettes. I remember it made me sick, it made me dizzy, but more importantly, I remember from that moment forward wanting to smoke cigarettes. So at 12, you can't really go out and buy a pack of smokes. So I would basically do what I could. I would take the burning cigarettes from the ashtray when my mother wasn't looking, or take cigarettes out of her pack, or even worse, I would take the butts out of the ashtray, which is really disgusting.
It was not easy. I probably quit 7, 8, 9 times, and then I'd come back hating myself. My son looked at me and he looked so disappointed. He knew I was smoking. He knew that I had just failed miserably. But when the mindset says, I need to quit, I want to quit, I have to quit, I'm going to quit, and then you try and you fail, you try and you fail, you try and you fail, you try and you fail. After a while, you say, screw it, I'm done. I'll go to my grave smoking.
And those are the people that are facing almost all the risks. Those are the people that are going to account for 99% of the lung cancers, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases, and heart diseases caused by smoking.
We always need a disruption to actually shift the market and the market forces. And I believe that Hon Lik's work as the inventor of an e-cigarette really represents this disruptive change.
我从18岁就开始吸烟，后来随着工作繁忙呢，吸烟越来越多，吸烟多了以后，我自己感觉引起身体很多的不适，尤其是这个呼吸系统、气管。我也试图多次的戒烟或者是减烟，但是经历一段时间以后都失败了。那么后来我用国产的那个尼古丁的贴剂，但经历一段时间都失败了。我在研究所呢，实际上工作了12年多，在研究所呢都是一些创新的项目，所以呢，凭借着我这个大学的药学专业的知识，还有我平时呢对电子学的这个爱好，那么我就有信心呢，能设计出了一款达到这样的一个使用目标的这个电子烟。那么从02年下半年我就开始陆续做这些相关实验，实验这个液体的雾化、携带尼古丁，以及呢这个在这种简易装这种吸入以后的感觉，那么通过这些实验，我就很有信心了，很有信心呢，就是创造一款这种史无前例的电子烟。
Just a brilliant moment in time in which lots of things came together and Hon Lik took it and actually made it a reality.
所以说我当得到了 尼古丁雾化的吸入的这样的一个设想的时候，那当然是很兴奋的，因为我立刻意识到我能够制造出来这种电子烟，而且我获得了一个重大发明的机会。尤其呢，在全世界众多的这么大数量的烟民
Honlik came up with this brilliant invention, and that's the mark of a true innovator, okay? It's somebody that paradigmically can shift things into a whole new way of doing things.
我知道我这样做的社会意义，如果能为此，使呢广大烟民这个健康状况有所提升，那么我觉得我为社会做了一个巨大的好事。
It was in 2005. Originally, I wasn't that excited when I saw just the manual, reading about it because I'm not a smoker. When I actually saw the product with the vapor coming out, I knew there was something there. So then we worked on it for like about a year. And so I officially formed Cetera in September of 2006. And then we launched it. Really, our big breakthrough was the CES show in January of 2008.
Dick Ludington here at CES, and I'm mostly interested in gadgets and things, but this caught my eye. This guy is here, and he is not smoking next to me because there is no smoking on the show floor, but he's not smoking. What exactly is Enjoy?
Enjoy is an electronic cigarette, and the way that we do this is we take a battery. From the battery, we have a patented vaporization system. So what you're seeing coming from the device is not smoke, it's vapor.
Became the hit of the show and got written up in a bunch of magazines and even online.
It's a huge memory void as to where I got my first e-cigarette. All I know is that I had, in 2007, 2 or 3 e-cigs, one from China, one from America, one from somewhere in Europe. And I'm playing with them. That's all I remember. And they're wonderful things, like absolutely amazing. But they're also really bad. I mean, you know, they're what they are is a proof of concept. And I'm struck by the potential here, thinking, my God, this will be the product that can transform smokers' lives. But this ain't going to do it. And then I thought, well, my God, there must be other people seeing the same thing as me, thinking, close, very, very close. And so, you know, where do you go? You look on the web and nothing. Nothing. A few dodgy commercials, a few kind of, you know, iStock photo images of people. You know. I thought, God, we need a conversation. We need to start a conversation. And what better way to do that than the most antiquated form of internet communications? A forum. That's what we need, a forum. So I set it up one night in I think, December 2007. And not much happened. So I went out, as you do, around the internet and said, hey guys, you want to talk about it? Come to my website. And people came, and we started a conversation about what are these products? Where do they come from? Who sells them? How much do they cost? But principally, these things have got to get better. How are they going to get better? You know, what's the difference? And we got very anal about it. So we were taking photographs of, you know, tiny little pieces of metal and connections and screws and things like this.
I think that I had seen a news story on CNN or something about this new gadget called an electronic cigarette. And I was a heavy smoker. So, you know, I had a love of electronics and gadgets, and I smoked about 2.5 packs a day. So I thought, well, whatever this thing is, it must be for me. So I went online and I found one, and back in those days, you know, 2007, all you could buy were these big, bulky pen-style e-cigs. And I bought one, not thinking much about it. And it showed up one day, and I put it together, and not really thinking it would be too impressive, but I took a drag, and I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. It was, I couldn't believe at how closely it mimicked the sensation of smoking. And I remember later that day, about 4 hours had gone by, and it occurred to me that I had forgotten to have a cigarette. I was just amazed by this, way more than I thought it would be. But there was one thing I was not amazed by, and that was the taste. It tasted awful. You really didn't know, in those days, you didn't know where the liquid was coming from. You didn't know how it was being made, and you didn't know what was in it. You know, in those days, you might be lucky if you'd get a little plastic bottle with some liquid in it, you know, that said vanilla or whatever. And that was it. There were no companies in the United States.
Everything was being made overseas at the time. And I was really surprised by that. So at that point, it wasn't about starting a company for me. It was about creating a liquid that I wanted to vape. That's all it was. So I started just trial and error, a lot of trial and error. I went out and bought all the tobacco I could. I bought cigarette tobacco, pipe tobacco, cigar tobacco, and just created this giant tobacco mixture. And what I decided to do was I went and got 5 coffee makers, and I lined them up on my kitchen counter. And I brewed essentially tobacco water, and I would use that water as the water to filter it all over again. And by the time I was done, I had essentially a highly concentrated tobacco reduction. And this was the primary flavoring. I went on to the ECF, and I asked if anyone wanted to try my new smoke juice that I was calling it by then. And if you want a free sample, let me know, and I'll send it to you. And kind of figured maybe 12, 13 people would reply, and I had over 300 replies. And it took about 2 weeks, but I got every single request out, and then the waiting began. And it was the longest week of my life. And so I'll never forget, about 6 days later, I got an email from someone who I knew was sampling it. And I remember I had to pull over before reading the email, because I figured, okay, well, it's all going to come down to this. Either they hate it or they love it. And so I pulled over, I looked at the email, and it said, you have to tell me how I can buy this. And I thought, okay, well, maybe we have something then.
It was around 2010. I saw a friend. He had a cigar-like, e-cig, and I asked him about it and thought, oh, that's cool. And a few months later, I did some research, and I got online, and I found there was a company in the UK that was selling better devices than what my friend had, and I bought one. And the day that e-cig arrived was a life changer. Literally, as soon as I started using it, I never had another cigarette. I lost it one night. I was out with friends, and in the morning I couldn't find it, and it was gone. And they were quite expensive back then, and you had to order them from overseas, and I couldn't afford to replace it immediately, and I couldn't have, even if I wanted to. There were no shops. There was nowhere to buy them in Australia at the time. So I went back to smokes. My sister died at 34 years old from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in her lungs. And there's no question that it was the smoking that did it to her. And I'd been trying to quit for years, and this had been the thing, the game changer that changed everything for me, and not being able to buy it locally just seemed insane. So I started a business, and it was great. It was almost word of mouth. At the beginning, it was just an online store. But it started to, get some traction, and things were going well.
The hobbyist side of things that you see today really started very, very early on with this kind of real obsession with precisely what these devices are and what made two devices different. And that's really how it all started.
As we've seen in so many other areas of technology, suddenly the cozy way in which public policy has driven tobacco was challenged by something new.
电子烟作为一个革命性的产品，那么在早期经历了不理解。
I don't think that people either on the public health side or the tobacco side expected how consumers would respond. Because it seems that the formulation of the early e-cigarettes met a need of a smoker to have what they really, many of them wanted, 70-80% want, to get nicotine's pleasures without getting the damaging effects.
Have we got a solution for you? The all-exclusive Smoking Everywhere electronic cigarette. Are you ready for a change?
In 2009 and 2010, the U.S. Customs agents seized almost 1,000 shipments of e-cigarettes at U.S. ports.
They made a determination that it was a drug delivery device, that since it was battery operated, that it was a device and therefore under their FDA, by drug delivery, there wasn't FDA approval for it, that they could seize the product. And they seized, I think, probably about $500,000 worth of product. And the product, when we got it back, was worthless.
Two e-cigarette companies, Smoking Everywhere and Enjoy, sued the FDA in 2009.
We were reasonably pessimistic at the time, and of course we had nowhere near the numbers of people using the products now.
This was an industry that needed all the help it could get.
One of our old moderators was actually day-to-day checking the court documents and finding out whether there'd been an update, and we were on tenterhooks. I mean, I talk about, assuming that ECF would only last two years, but right then we were thinking everything was going to just disappear. I mean, there was absolutely no certainty whatsoever that the judgment was going to come back against what the FDA was doing at the time.
There was definitely a prevailing sense that if the ruling came down in favor of the FDA, it likely would have meant the end of the industry before it really had a chance to get off the ground.
I filed an amicus brief with the D.C. Court of Appeals in 2010 in support of their case, and we won.
The U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia has issued a decision granting leading global electronic cigarette brand Enjoy's motion for preliminary injunction seeking to prevent the FDA from detaining or refusing admission into the U.S. of its electronic cigarette products.
We had the hearing in September of 2010, and actually on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, voted 3-0 in our favor. The FDA tried to appeal again. They turned them down. They announced they weren't going to appeal to the Supreme Court.
There's a lot of celebrating going on.
Enjoy heroes in this industry for having carried that case to its final conclusion. They really are, because without that, I don't think anybody else could have stepped up to the plate.
I remember thinking that this is the start of the industry.
There's a new warning this morning that e-cigarettes may not be as safe as they seem. The New England Journal of Medicine says e-cigarette users are 5 to 15 times more likely to get formaldehyde-related cancers than long-term smokers. Formaldehyde is the toxic chemical found in the devices.
This is the part in our journey where people that were actually using these devices reached out to us. They felt like it had saved their lives, yet it was under attack. At first we were skeptical. Just like everyone else, we'd seen the headlines that vaping might be more dangerous than smoking cigarettes.
This is a dangerous product.
The poisonous product of nicotine.
New study shows that e-cigarettes are more deadly than regular cigarettes?
These really have me concerned.
These products are exposing you to a variety of toxic chemicals.
Understanding that over 1 billion people are going to die this century from smoking, we knew we had to find the truth.
Because I'm not a smoker or a vapor, we packed our bags and headed around the world to meet with leading scientists and health experts to find out what was really going on.
I think the first thing the world needs to know about vaping is that all of the harm and the 1 billion lives that we're talking about in tobacco use comes from smoking, comes from setting fire to it and inhaling the smoke. So it's the toxic particles, the toxic gases, that's what's doing the damage.
The real problem is if you set tobacco alight and you inhale it, it's bad for you. If you put a piece of beef in the oven and you overcook it and you eat it, it's bad for you. Anything you set alight and inhale or ingest is bad for you.
Deal with the smoke, you solve the problem. We know how to deal with the smoke. So I think people working on this every morning, just like Clinton, when he first ran for president, had that sign saying, "It's the economy, stupid," to remind him every day what to concentrate on. It's really simple. It's the smoke, stupid.
A normal cigarette has at least 4,000 toxicants, including it has nicotine as well. And if a consumer would take all of that on board, 1 out of 2 of those consumers will develop disease and die an early death. Solid evidence to back that up.
If somebody would have said, "Bill, can you think of a parameters of a product to replace cigarettes?" Theoretically, I'd have said, well, it would be 99% less hazardous than cigarettes. It wouldn't be addicting non-smokers. It wouldn't encourage anybody to switch to cigarettes. And it would help lots of people quit smoking. That's the ideal solution to the cigarette epidemic in this world. It's called vaping.
It's not smoking. There's no tobacco, nothing is lit on fire. Vaping uses a battery, which powers an atomizer, which vaporizes a liquid, which may or may not have nicotine in it, has a flavoring, and is made with an FDA-approved food-grade liquid base.
Well, I first became interested when some of the most hardened smokers that I saw as a general practitioner started giving up with the use of these, and that really sort of sparked my fascination with this whole idea of turning the idea of quitting on its head, instead of being about denial and withdrawal, but being about something exciting and something better than smoking.
It's going to be one of the biggest contributions to public health this century. It's a really transformative technology. I mean, just think back 100 or plus years when the cigarette was first invented. That was transformative. Did away with all other kinds of tobacco products. E-cigarettes are going to be equally transformative.
It can save 1 billion lives.
Anytime someone attacks a promising alternative to a massive problem, and you have to ask why. The answer is money. Money, and one of the most fascinating alliances in history.
Well, there are lots of forces at play, pro-vaping and anti-vaping, and it's hugely complex.
The war on vaping began with the FDA's attack, but they weren't the only ones on their side. To fully understand this alliance that formed, we need to go to the American South and the theory of the Baptists and the bootleggers. In many counties, they hold periodic votes to decide the fate of alcohol sales. An unholy alliance forms between the preachers who don't want alcohol being used in their communities and the bootleggers who are willing to sell alcohol when and where it's not legal. They're happy to help the preachers restrict alcohol sales because that kills their competition. It's a classic example of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. At the end of the day, they both drive around town with the same bumper stickers. Unfortunately, counties that vote to restrict alcohol sales have higher rates of drunk driving fatalities. We see the same two sides in the vaping wars. You have the bootleggers who are opposed to vaping for business reasons, and you have the preachers who are opposed to vaping on moralistic grounds. Well, let's talk about the bootlegger side. Remember Big Tobacco? They don't like competition for their $1 trillion business.
Analysts say electronic or e-cigarettes will become a $2 billion industry worldwide by the end of the year, with some predicting sales will outpace conventional cigarettes within 5 to 10 years.
Cigarette companies realize that e-cigarettes are now a threat to the old business.
And are they?
Huge threat.
It's one of the very rare cases where you have such a controversy about a product, and to the point that people don't understand that it is the main competitor of tobacco cigarettes today. The e-cigarette is the main competitor of tobacco cigarettes.
Some people have had changes in behavior, hostility, agitation, depressed mood, and suicidal thoughts or actions while taking or after stopping Chantix. Some people can have allergic or serious skin reactions to Chantix, some of which can be life-threatening. Patients also reported trouble sleeping and vivid, unusual, or strange dreams. Talk to your doctor to find out if prescription Chantix is right for you.
Drug companies know that doctors hold all the real power in the prescription drug business.
Break the hold of nicotine addiction. See your doctor about treatments.
While they spend nearly $4 billion a year marketing directly to us, they spend an estimated $24 billion a year marketing directly to doctors.
Big pharmaceutical companies, also lovingly known as Big Pharma, want to protect their $6 billion nicotine replacement therapy business.
Not only are they trying to ban all the competitors, the smoke-free alternatives, but they are trying to promote gums, patches, lozenges, and FDA-approved drugs as the only effective way to quit smoking.
I'm not a big fan of Nicotrol, Nicoban, Habitrol, the inhalers, which contain the exact same thing that vaping devices have, the propylene glycol. The only thing it doesn't have is the flavors.
Nicotine replacement therapy, which is not an attractive product at all, and it does not deliver the success that it should.
Okay, I'm gonna cook the purple one.
He gets the prescription from his doctor. It's also found in the over-the-counter anti-smoking drug Zyban. But crushed, cooked, and injected, it delivers a crack cocaine-like high. Each hit leaves a scar, skin abscesses, collapsed veins, and clogged arteries. Injuries attributed to injecting Wellbutrin and Zyban. It's killed 6 people in Ontario.
People go out and get a prescription for Shantex. That was fast-tracked through the FDA. Has a black box warning on it. Could cause you to have suicidal thoughts. Could cause you to commit suicide. But that's fine. Let's just keep selling that crap,
If you look at the United Kingdom and the solid evidence which is being built up by Robert West, it shows without any doubt that e-cigarettes have already supplanted nicotine replacement therapy, medicine, as the preferred way for smokers to quit or to substitute their smoking.
So if you're a pharmaceutical company who's starting to see your share of the market on nicotine replacement therapy slide relative to these up-and-coming e-cig people, what are you going to do? You're going to sit on your bum and do nothing?
Under the Korean law, electronic cigarettes are considered cigarettes until comprehensive research proves that e-cigarettes are harm-free and contribute to quitting smoking. Nicotine patches or chews that are scientifically proven to be safe should be promoted.
It made sense to find big tobacco and big pharma in the bootlegger camp because they sell things. But it was confusing to us when we found national governments were right there with them.
Governments worldwide are the biggest shareholders in the revenue of cigarettes.
Using the United States as an example, in 2010, the year that the FDA went after vaping, the federal government collected $15.5 billion in tobacco taxes. Just 3 years later, after vaping began to take off, tobacco taxes were down to $14 billion. That's a difference of $1.5 billion.
The e-cigarette industry should be put out of business.
The government's getting billions and billions and billions of tax revenue.
But it's not just the taxes. Some countries actually own their own tobacco companies.
The Chinese National Tobacco Corporation is the main supplier of cigarettes. It's 100% owned by the Chinese government. So in effect, the Chinese government is the world's largest tobacco company.
Japan Tobacco owns the Camel brand. Besides those two, there are 14 other countries that own large tobacco companies. So who are the preachers? Unfortunately, these are the people smokers go to for advice. They're medical professionals and other healthcare organizations like the CDC, FDA, and the World Health Organization.
The fundamental truth, I think, is that the battle in the end became very personalized. It became public health versus the tobacco industry.
Tobacco control has had decades of doing the same things, just, screwing down the controls a bit harder, increasing the taxes a bit more, doing plain packaging, none of which I disagree with. But when something comes totally out of left field, I don't think they know how to deal with it.
The groups that were kind of in charge of that around the world felt that really they were in the final leg. The final push would just end this story forever.
And now we cannot allow e-cigarettes to snuff out the progress we've made preventing nicotine addiction and its deadly consequences.
It's shocking to hear it. I almost, flinch when I hear, colleagues saying things about e-cigarettes that they know or they should know are completely wrong, or exaggerated, or scaremongering. There's too much of that going on.
We don't know enough research in terms of the long-term risk.
The jury's out on this one.
They might or might not be able to help you quit, but there are definite harms that they can cause.
We don't yet know about vaping.
It's the same as antifreeze.
We used to have very dangerous products, and the makers of those used to lie about those. We now have much safer products, and the public health community is lying about those.
We know that they don't actually allow people to stop smoking.
Now there's even more evidence that these are a gateway to smoking regular cigarettes.
The e-cigarette makers are making these for kids because they make chocolate and other flavors.
What's going on?
Frankly, I don't think they can see too clearly sometimes when it comes to a product that involves nicotine, like e-cigarettes. Because of the association with tobacco, that just seems to blot out the sun for these people, and they can't look at the facts as objectively as they otherwise might.
In many people's mind, nicotine is so closely associated with tobacco and smoke that they don't separate out that this is just one of the components in a cigarette.
What we always used to say in the stop smoking services is that nicotine is as addictive as heroin and cocaine. But actually, we're finding more now that once you take it out of the cigarette, which we know has got other chemicals in to enhance the action of nicotine, it doesn't seem to be so addictive.
You never see anyone sniffing pure nicotine. You never see anyone injecting pure nicotine. No one wants to inject or to use nicotine in a pure form. And you know, it would be much cheaper to get nicotine, you know, as a solution rather than to take it from cigarettes. But everyone likes cigarettes because it's not only nicotine.
It's not particularly dangerous in itself. Some people are saying, well, in terms of risk, it may be on a level with, say, coffee, something like that.
Nicotine is a mild stimulant. We have data from Sweden where they have huge rates of nicotine use, lifelong use. The rates of lung cancer are half that of the rest of Europe. The rates of heart attacks are half that of the rest of Europe. And the reason is because the tobacco they use is a special smokeless pasteurised product called snus, which is a harm reduction product, much the same as electronic cigarettes are. And so we know that really lifelong use of nicotine, you can't measure any significant health impacts from that.
The data we have on that it really comes from looking at people using patches and gums, and the data show that you can use nicotine for many, many years.
Many people have gone on to be lifelong users, including, I might say, my sister, with no additional risk, but dramatic declines in their probability of risks. And I think part of it is the way physicians, nurses, health professionals get trained and the way they send their message forward. They often don't know that very simple fact.
What I'm extremely disappointed with in myself and in our movement, especially around the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, is that we did not recognize the central role of nicotine, molecule nicotine, and the possibility of tobacco harm reduction. Frankly, you don't get people to move, and especially not 1.4 billion people to move by giving them a sermon and lecturing them and saying, you quit or you die. Here's some nicotine replacement therapy, your gum or your patch. You're only allowed to use it for 12 weeks because you're a bad person. You need to stop smoking and use this, and then let's hope that we can fix you. And that's a gap, and it's a great failing.
What struck me was in my career, which extends from working on tobacco in South Africa through WHO, is how rarely we actually make the point very clearly that nicotine addicts, tar kills, that very simple separation of what's in a product. And yet we've known it for years. It was in the original Surgeon General's report in 1964, clearly stated that long-term use of nicotine alone confers very little to no harms on people.
Do those professionals actually know how people die of smoking? And then you get to the disturbing fact that if you ask the question to, let's say, the physicians in America, does nicotine cause cancer? Simple question. Does that cause cancer? 70% of them would say yes. And the science is absolutely clear that nicotine is not a carcinogen. It is an addictive agent, so it's part of the ritual and the attractiveness of people smoking cigarettes, but it's not the nicotine that kills, it's the tar and the smoke. We weren't honest with our patients. If health professionals and those who are in a position of trust, where people would want to confide or discuss quitting, you would want them to have the right information. And that to me was the shocking part in myself, is that I did not know that a nicotine is not a carcinogen. So where I would have been in a position to help my patients or family members who smoked with less harmful products, so that if they couldn't stop or quit smoking, to at least switch to something less harmful. And unfortunately, the health professionals, and especially physicians, are normally not in a position where they get feedback when they are wrong. Very honest to say that I personally got it wrong.
FDA's own funded scientists came out and said that vapors are exposed to dramatically less toxicants than smokers, and they are exposed to very similar levels of toxicants as non-tobacco users. Unfortunately, the FDA officials, when they talk to the news media, don't say that.
The dilemma is you can't get 1.4 billion people. It's the size of the Catholic Church. It's the size of the Indian population. All to quit smoking cigarettes tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. So the alternative is to provide safer, not safe, but safer alternatives.
All these other products are so much less hazardous, and yet our public health agencies are saying, no, you have to absolutely stop all tobacco and all nicotine use. That's their goal.
As we look at the arguments against vaping from the preachers, it seems that there's an issue of pride. Nobody likes to admit that they're wrong, especially when they're the expert.
My name is Serena Chan. I'm with the American Lung Association.
Every time we watched a public hearing about vaping, it was intriguing to see that one of the major health charities was there to attack it immediately.
The anti-tobacco community is also a small economy in itself.
Cancer, Heart, and Lung, for the last 20 years, their tobacco control advocacy has all been financed by pharmaceutical grants and contracts. I found out that cancer is a $150 billion industry. American Cancer Society, the most profitable nonprofit organization out there. Every advertisement on television you saw for gums, patches, and lozenges, for the Nicoderm, Nicorette, and Commit lozenge, it said sponsored by the American Cancer Society and had the American Cancer Society logo on it. And every state has a chapter, every county has a chapter, and every city has a chapter. 17 to 18% of that money goes to research. The rest goes to the multi-million-dollar salaries of all of the CEOs, CFOs, COOs, CDOs, CLOs. Everybody's got, and so on and so on and so on. I just know that people keep donating year after year after year after year, and we have more walks and more relays and more ribbons because people haven't done what the problem needed to be done, and that is stop the source of the problem. You go to a river, you see a baby floating down, a dead baby floating down, you pull the dead baby out, pull the dead baby out. Another baby comes out, pull the dead baby. All we're doing is reaction. Pull the dead. Look, go to the beginning of the mouth of the river and see who's throwing the babies in. Then stop that person, then maybe we won't have the dead babies floating down the river. I know I'm being obnoxious here, but it's as simple as that.
If the tobacco model as we know it were to change drastically, all of those NGOs would be out of business. They're holding on to the foe. They don't want the foe to die.
Then I started investigating the product and I could see the potential. I was worried also because the potential was very high. I said, wow, my smoking cessation center will be out of business in a matter of few years.
So we have the bootleggers with their billions of dollars, and we have the preachers with their loud voices and trusted brands. How does this truth stand a chance, especially when the vast majority of vaping advocates are a ragtag bunch of unorganized vapors, and their loudest group are the cloud chasers?
Well, for the first time, stopping smoking can be fun. You don't see websites devoted to the latest patch. You don't see any chat like that. You see masses of chat in the forums and so on, people talking about these devices, how they're using them. So it's kind of interesting, and there's a kind of a bit of a community sense.
They're hanging out together. They're a group again. They're family. They were persecuted. He was persecuted. She was. So now they can all come together, and they're not going to be persecuted anymore because they've done what we've asked them to do, and that is find a safer alternative.
But the vast majority of vapers are moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas, your neighbors, who are desperately trying to quit something that is slowly killing them.
I'm from the UK. I'm a dad, an IT engineer, a vapor, an archer, a cook, a husband. Used to be a chemist, and used to be a smoker. I tried NRT, and I tried cold turkey, and I tried all sorts of things to try and give up smoking because I knew it was making me ill. In the year before I stopped smoking, I had more than 4 serious chest infections that required inhalers and drugs, and it was crazy. Just over 5 years ago, I came across this bad boy. I haven't got rid of it because, well, God of a saviour. And that day, I stopped smoking tobacco. That was it. I quit. That's pretty powerful stuff. I just got a device myself. I didn't need anyone's help. I didn't need a prescription. I didn't need a doctor to say so. I didn't need a handout from the government or the health authority or a charity. I just quit smoking. That's mad. That's kind of cool.
In the meantime, the people who have the power to help them quit smoking find themselves in a conflict of interest. Let's look at the FDA. The FDA is known to have a history of hiring people from Big Pharma, and then once they're done at the FDA, they go back to Big Pharma. It's a revolving door. The current head of the FDA Center for Tobacco is a former lobbyist for the Big Pharma company that sells Nicorette gum in the United States. This is the same division that in 2014 proposed banning 99% of the vapor products on the market.
It will ban more than 99.99% of all e-cigarette products on the market today.
Over in California, State Senator Leno is accepting large campaign contributions from Big Pharma, while at the same time proposing regulations and taxes on vapor products.
We are at risk of losing 25 years' effort and a $2 billion investment in keeping a next generation from becoming addicted to the killing drug of nicotine. We have information from not only the California Department of Public Health, which has declared these devices to be dangerous and unsafe, and they are currently in the midst of an educational campaign. You may have seen some of the television commercials that are out right now.
You smoke pack after pack, day after day.
I'm back in baby's arms. I miss those loving arms.
Your taste stays fresh.
I'm back where I belong. Back in baby's arms.
And then you're going to hear from all the health advocacy groups, the Lung Association, the Heart Association, the Cancer Society. All those who are in the business of protecting public health will be speaking in support.
The American Cancer Society took endorsement money for nicotine patches and gum, and then released official statements warning against vaping.
For disclosure, neither I nor Smoke Free Pennsylvania has ever received any funding from any tobacco company, from any drug company, or from any e-cigarette company. Most of the anti-tobacco movement, the large organizations, for the last 20 years, the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, the American Cancer Society, the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and many more have received hundreds of millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture and market the nicotine gums, lozenges, and patches, and the Chantix and Wellbutrin medicines. For the last 10 years, these organizations have been lobbying to ban all smoke-free alternatives, and we know, they started with smokeless tobacco, with snus, with dissolvables, with lozenges, the tobacco lozenges that came out, and then when e-cigarettes came out, the first thing they did was urge the FDA to ban them in 2009, and the FDA did.
When you have this kind of a triage, okay, and then you have these other people now feeding off the tentacles, cancer, lung, heart, getting all this money from the government, getting money from the master tobacco settlement. What are they supposed to do?
With all the lobbying from big charities, it looks like government took the convenient opportunity to protect their tobacco profits.
The category is under threat. Countries like Singapore, Thailand, probably Indonesia, Australia, have banned e-cigarettes. We just had a vapor from Australia saying she's smoked for 43 years. She tried everything, patches, gum, behavioral therapy, the works. Didn't work. She heard about e-cigarettes and she asked her local pharmacist, can she have that? And she said no. Then she phoned the quit line. Could she have an e-cigarette? She's tried all the other modalities of cessation. They said, no, it's illegal. So that is sending her to an early death.
20 countries have now banned e-cigarettes due to World Health Organization telling them to.
In Hong Kong, it's a $12,000 fine and or up to 2 years in jail. In Brunei, it's $10,000. This has happened all over the world where countries have banned or heavily restricted vaping.
And you're doing nothing about smoking. So you're in a place where you can get cigarettes everywhere, but you cannot get e-cigarettes.
By banning all these least hazardous alternatives, they're actually protecting cigarette markets.
A vapor from Dubai, he was telling me that he had quit smoking 2 years ago with e-cigarettes, but he was forced by the government, due to the ban, to illegally introduce e-cigarette products in the country in order for him to stay off cigarettes. So you are forcing someone to do some illegal actions in order to stay away from cigarettes. And I don't see any reasoning and any common sense behind that.
In some countries, you need a prescription to vape, but you can go to the store and buy cigarettes. In Australia, they ban vaping liquids that have nicotine in them because they say nicotine is a poison. Yet they sell nicotine gum right in convenience stores without any sort of prescription.
Bam, 3 black SUVs raided my house. They had a search warrant, a search and seizure warrant, and they came in and they went through all my things. They bagged and tagged everything they could find related to electronic cigarettes, and they took all my stuff. It was horrible. It was a scene out of it was like they thought I was some sort of Colombian drug cartel or something. They were alleging that I had breached an obscure Tobacco Control Act law that said it is illegal to sell a product that is not a tobacco product but is designed to resemble a tobacco product. The law wasn't written to block electronic cigarettes. The law was written to block candy cigarettes. Those little white cigarettes with the little red ends on them. That's what the law was written for. And the health department were trying to stretch this law and use it to block a life-saving technology. It was insane. But nonetheless, they took all my things and I had to shut the business down. It was horrible after all this success and seeing the difference I was making in so many people's lives, to have it just shut down and taken away like that was just, it was just horrible. I felt I couldn't let this go. If I had given up at that point in time, it was over. A precedent would have been set, banning the sale of these devices. I can't possibly explain what it's like to tell your family that you're going to push ahead with this thing, even though it's probably going to bankrupt you, but you simply got to do it because it's the right thing to do. And then at the end, after you do it all, and you go through all these sacrifices and all of this pain, and all of the fights and arguments, the court simply ignores the argument and simply finds you guilty. The lives of millions of Australians and billions of people worldwide don't appear to matter in this situation. It seems to be about money. Somebody's got an agenda, and it isn't about us. Don't let the bastards win. I think that's all for now.
One of the biggest vaping news stories in 2015 was when Portland State University came out with a study showing that there was more formaldehyde in vapor than in cigarettes.
Formaldehyde study basically was a fraud. The person who did it set the PV on the wrong setting, and it would dry puff and no vapor could use it.
All the way up to 12. I'm not trying this all the way through. Wish me luck. Oh. It can't be done.
But they made a machine inhale it, and then they assumed this machine would inhale so many hundreds of inhales every hour for the rest of their life. For 75 years they projected it out to be, and they added up all these dry puffs, of the machine dry puffing for 75 years in a row, and then said it might be more carcinogenic than cigarette smoking. But it was a fraud. A lot of these researchers, they're mostly funded by the federal government. The Food and Drug Administration and the Department of Health and Human Services, through the National Institutes of Health and through the Centers for Disease Control, are funding most of the people who are trying to ban e-cigarettes, and they're funding them to go out and lobby to ban e-cigarettes.
Even though it's completely illegal, the CDC gave grants to the Washington State chapter of the American Lung Association, who used that money for lobbying. This is what happened.
King 5 News.
For so many adults, this has been a life-changing intervention.
Now at 6:30, a heated hearing in Olympia as the state tries to become the first in the nation to regulate e-cigarettes like tobacco. South Bureau Chief Drew Mickelson looks at the proposal that would make Washington's vaping laws some of the toughest in the country.
It's a violation of federal law to use federal funding to lobby for laws, but it's been going on. The CDC's been warned about it by the Department of Health and Human Inspectors. Inspector General did a report. They had hearings in front of the U.S. House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee on this. That Tom Frieden was warned that he could not, insist in his grants giving out to state health departments that they lobby for laws. He was putting it in the grants, and it's a violation of federal law. So this has been going on. This is why all these cities, municipal health departments and state health department directors have come out calling for bans on e-cigarettes, because they don't want to lose their CDC funding. And why these researchers keep coming out. Every researcher that comes out and generates a news story saying e-cigarettes contain toxic chemicals gets another $10 million grant from the FDA or the National Institutes of Health.
Nothing motivates people quite like fear, especially when it involves our children.
This recent report found nearly 2 million middle school and high school students have tried electronic cigarettes, or e-cigarettes. That set off some alarm bells, and this week 40 state attorneys general called on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to regulate e-cigs just like it regulates tobacco.
The federal health agency's goals was hoping by year 2020 that we could get the past month smoking rate among youth down to 16%. It's down below 10% now. 5 years ahead of schedule. And it's because of e-cigarettes.
The regulatory authorities then confuse the water by saying, well, maybe it reduces harm, but maybe it doesn't. And we definitely need more research. Well, of course, we need more research on everything.
Well, I mean, what do you think? Is it a question of they're bad for you, or we just still don't know?
I think what we can say basically is they might or might not be able to help you quit, but there are definite harms that they can cause. And those definite harms are in different environments. So if they get kids hooked on nicotine, that's a really bad thing.
Virtually all the daily users of teenagers are either smokers or people who used to smoke. And the problem is the researchers aren't disclosing a lot of this daily use data. The only 2 surveys that have ever asked people, did you vape nicotine or no nicotine? And they found 96% of all non-smokers who had ever used an e-cigarette in their life used no nicotine e-cigarettes.
You've called this deeply troubling in the past. I mean, why?
Well, if you start with e-cigarettes, there's a real likelihood that you will become nicotine addicted.
The so-called gateway effect is used as a reason why e-cigarettes should not be used. If children start with e-cigarettes, that leads as a gateway to stronger drugs and to smoking. There's no evidence to back that up yet.
Just applying first principles to it. If a product has mainly or only nicotine and another one has nicotine and tar, I don't think you need a long-term 10-year study to say the former is definitely a better choice for a smoker who wants to quit than the latter.
You don't think if they had something so solid that vaping and e-cigs were deadly and harmful, the formaldehyde, the carcinogens, the nickel, the cadmium, it's all bullshit.
If you look at the United Kingdom, e-cigarette users up to the end of last year, 70% of them thought that e-cigarettes were safer than standard cigarettes. That was their perception. And in the space of 6 months, that's dropped down to a perception rate of about 43%. So through the misinformation, bad science, it's hurt the category.
Let me ask about the other people who are around people who may be smoking e-cigarettes. You know, there's the idea of secondhand smoke. I mean, we know about that with cigarettes, but some researchers say the amount of potential carcinogens in the vapor potentially is extremely minute, that it's insignificant, in fact. I mean, do you disagree with that?
Well, we don't know what's in more than 200 different e-cigarette products out there. What we do know is that there's nicotine.
There should be accurate and responsible communication of the facts to the consumer. And such a responsible agency would need to weigh their words very carefully.
The dangers of e-cigarettes are clear. Today's electronic cigarettes are no better than the Joe Camels of the past.
If all the smokers of cigarettes today switch to e-cigarettes tomorrow, the billion lives will definitely be significantly reduced.
It's the smoking that kills people. It's not the nicotine. It's people smoke for the nicotine, but they die because they inhale smoke.
You have none of the tar, the smoke, or the 4,000 plus chemicals going into your body.
There's no evidence that vaping has caused or associated with any disease. And we know that it's helped several million people quit smoking.
So the billion lives that we're trying to save, better do a hell of a lot more than we're doing now, because right now the army isn't big enough. A lot of people don't even want to fight the war anymore because it's an uphill battle, and people are exhausted and tired and frustrated and angry and pissed off and upset with the fact that we can't fix it because it's truthful and it's right.
But things are not looking good.
The numbers now show that e-cigarette sales are down.
Europe just passed all kinds of rules that are going to take beneficial products off the shelves and out of the lives of thousands of people who are trying to quit smoking.
It will close down the market for the independents. It will hand a majority control to the tobacco industry who are producing devices. And I think it will be a damaging thing to the whole of the vaping industry. I'm very disappointed in the way things are going.
Here in Poland we have over 1 million vapers, and we estimate that after that heavy legislation, it will be 500,000, not more, or even less. We are trying to find a way to fight. It's not easy because TPD is already a law in the European Union.
In the US, the same thing. The FDA just passed all kinds of new rules that will keep millions of people smoking.
The FDA has estimated that more than 98.5% of all e-cigarette products on the market will be banned by their regulation. All e-liquid will be banned. This is not a proposed regulation to protect children as the FDA has presented it falsely to the news media. It's prohibition plan B.
You know what the FDA is going to do. You know what EU is going to do. You know what Germany is going to do. You know what Malaysia is going to do. You know what Brazil is going to do. You know what Argentina is going to do. We all know the die is cast, the cast is formed, the stage is set, and the script is written. End of story. Why? Because nobody cares.
The billion lives. The billion lives, billion people with names. They each have a name. And if you and I were in discussion with them, would it not be fair and responsible to provide them with the right information? The question is, how much evidence is sufficient for that one person sitting in front of you? So if you're the nurse or the pharmacist or the dentist and it's your patient and they ask you, I'd like to use an e-cigarette, what's your view? Then you can't say, well, we need to do more research. That's just not helpful. It's irresponsible.
The public needs to know the truth about these products.
And they need public health people telling the truth about the risks, at least 95% less risky than smoking.
If we look at the history of public health, the biggest breakthroughs are associated historically with two really, really simple things. One, you give people enough information that they can make an informed decision about what they're going to do. And two, you give them the ability to act on that information.
It's a crime not to tell the billion people who will lose their life because they smoke of the alternative.
Right, we are losing. We are losing fast and furious and big. And who's going to lose? The smokers, again, who are now trying to transition over when they've been asked and begged and cried for years and years. And now we have something that's viable and we're not giving it to them. It's just shameful. It's embarrassing. This is not how people should treat other people, especially under the guise of public health and compassion and love and liberty and freedom and all that. You know, I'm sick of it.
What we have here is that the best kept secret in tobacco cessation, tobacco harm reduction, is the use of safer alternative nicotine products, and that consumers are denied that right.
We have this huge, glaring opportunity to do something that would sort of rival eradication of smallpox or dealing with cholera, sanitation as one of the biggest public health breakthroughs we've ever had. And it's staring us in the face. And it's not conceptually difficult. And we've got examples of where it's worked. When we look at things like Swedish snus, we have proof of concept that people can get their nicotine in far less hazardous ways and be just fine with it. And it hasn't happened yet.
And I guess really what prompted me to want to quit was seeing my uncle dying of lung cancer. And without a shadow of a doubt, he was the most genuine and kind-hearted person I've ever known in my life.
People are going to die. People are going to get sick. There are people who should have had the opportunity to grow old, to be part of their grandchildren's lives, You know, I knew firsthand the experience that I had had, how dramatic the change in my life and my health had been. I'd seen dozens of friends and family members, actually hundreds really in the end, of lives that had been directly changed by using these devices. And the health department, like that's their name, the health department, we're banning them. You can still buy cigarettes, you know, buy any tobacco product you like, but you can't buy the alternative that, you know, we know is significantly, I mean, like, you know, over 95% safer.
And really, I didn't want my children to have to see me that way. I wanted to be able to be there for them more in the future and extend my life for them. And essentially that is what vaping has done. Vaping has helped me to quit smoking cigarettes. And for that, I am thankful.
1 billion lives are at stake. The status quo is winning. Smoking is strong. The battle rages on even as you watch this. Big business and government are working together all over the world to serve the few at the expense of the many. We see so many examples in our food system, our medicine, and now we see it in the push to preserve smoking and its cash flow, to condemn 1 billion people to death, billions of mourning kids, billions of broken hearts. We can choose a better approach. We can end fear-mongering. We can help our neighbors live better. We can help our neighbors live longer. And we must.
I've heard a lot of funny stories and opinions now to get the whole thing straight. You can't keep a bunch of hypocrites and liars all from showing their face. But the damage has been done. Our battle's not quite won. So let's take it to the streets and sing for the sun. What happened to uniting young and old? We're all equally sick of doing what we're told. Grab a hold. And when it comes to controlling the masses, they've got us full of faker teens with TV classes, 3D glasses. But the damage has been done. Our back